Hi, my name is Lisa Seidel, and I'm a second-year nursing major here at UCLA, and I have lived in a university apartment and in on-campus housing in a dorm for the past 2 years now. And so I think over those 2 years I've gained some interesting experiences and perspectives on things. And so I wanted to make this little video for anyone that's thinking of applying or has applied or has recently been accepted into UCLA, just to kind of share my opinions on UCLA and also some of my friends and roommates. I've kind of collected some things, and so I'll share that here with you. And I have 4 categories. So the categories are academics, housing, dining, and social life, like just kind of the atmosphere on campus. So I'll kind of dive into each of those categories a little deeper, and yeah, I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so the first category I'm going to get into is academics. And one of the big things I want to emphasize here is that, at least within my experience at UCLA and some of my friends, we kind of have all agreed that people aren't as competitive as you might think they might be. Being arguably the #1 public university, it definitely going into it, it was kind of scary, thinking that there would be a lot of competition and that people just wouldn't be very accepting of you and that there was a lot of pressure to do well. But that's definitely not the case, at least in my experience. Everyone's kind of on the same page, especially your freshman year, and everyone's just trying to figure it out. And no one really cares if you're doing worse than others or if you're not doing as great or with test scores and stuff. So I think that's really nice that there's not as much of a competitive aspect to it as you might think. Another thing when it comes to classes is to make sure that you're researching all of your classes on Bruin Walk before you take them. So Bruin Walk is like UCLA's Rate My Professor. So students can go on there and say what grade they got in a class and then add anything they want to specifically about the professor or the course. And I found this really helpful. I think it's something you have to do, even with classes that are mandatory for your major. Just kind of getting an understanding of what the class is like, what the grade distribution is, kind of a lot of people leave tips on the professor and things that you can do to do well in that class. Just to kind of know what to expect for the next quarter and how heavy your course load might be. And if your class isn't on Bruin Walk, another useful resource is the UCLA page on Reddit. So UCLA on Reddit, there's a pretty big community, and they'll share all kinds of information just kind of about campus life and anything that's relevant right now. And you can search and go back and look at old classes or old dorm buildings or basically any information you want to know. A lot of people have posted on there, and there's some pretty great information there. In terms of studying for classes, one tip that I have, which is something I'm actually working on trying to do, I have a pretty set goal for next quarter, since next quarter is going to be pretty tough for me to kind of implement this, but I haven't been very successful with it yet. But something that I've seen work pretty well for a lot of people is to kind of break up your studying for midterms and finals throughout the quarter. So even though the quarter is only 10 weeks long and it seems like there's not that much information that you'll have to cover, it definitely adds up by the time midterms and finals come around. And so to kind of take that weight off, it can be really helpful kind of at the end of the week to gather all your notes and make an outline or kind of summarize it or rewrite your notes in a way that you'll be able to look back on it and understand it better. That way you're not spending the time that you're studying kind of rewriting your notes and relearning information, and instead you're just using that as a resource to do either practice questions or things like that that are more beneficial for your studying. And then another thing with classes is a lot of things that freshmen worry about is showing up to class early and being able to find your class. And I found that it's completely fine to show up to your class early. I mean, there's people there 10-15 minutes earlier. As long as there's not a class before that, you can totally just go into the lecture hall and get your stuff set up and find a good seat. Even if the professor's not there yet, all the lecture halls and stuff are open. And it definitely helps with the nerves, getting there early and being able to situate yourself and get ready for the class. And maybe you can even find people to talk to and make some friends in that class. So that's definitely a good tip. And then another thing about classes, there's a lot of debate over 8 a.m.s and whether or not they're worth it. I remember when I was researching classes and kind of just things about college in general, is a lot of people talk very negatively about 8 a.m.s and say how horrible they are and how impossible they are and how no one can do it even if you're a morning person. And I would definitely disagree with that. I would definitely consider myself a morning person, and it probably takes some adjustment, but don't like let that scare you. If you think that you can handle it, like try it for a quarter, see how it is. I think it's kind of nice to get your classes out of the way in the morning. That way you have the rest of the day kind of to yourself. You can study, you can like take a break. But it definitely depends on the person. But yeah, just don't let people scare you out of that, and kind of form that opinion by yourself. And on top of that, with scheduling your classes, you want to make sure that if possible, you don't overload your schedule freshman year. If that means like taking 3 classes or taking some more fun classes, that's something that's really recommended for freshmen or first year transfers, especially if you're not familiar with the quarter system and kind of the pace of things. It can be very overwhelming, and everything can kind of pile on if you don't have a good study method and a way to kind of organize all your assignments and make sure you're turning everything in on time. And for freshmen, there's these classes called Fiat Luxes. As a nursing major, we weren't able to take them, but they're super cool classes. Like you can take them on like zombie apocalypses and like a whole bunch of random stuff. So that's something I definitely wish I would have done. That's only open to freshmen. And there's a whole bunch of other fun classes. So like if you can take something like that your freshman year, just to kind of like ease into the college process, I think that's a really great tool to use. And so adding on to this with kind of those fun classes that are outside of your major, something that I didn't realize, at least before coming here, was that it's very easy to take classes outside of your major. If there's something that you're really interested in, like photography or film or dance or theater or stuff like that, it's very easy to just take one of those classes if you have room in your schedule. There's very few classes that are exclusively for that minor. For example, I took a class last quarter on the Beatles and kind of how their band like grew over time, and how they like took over the world. And I've taken a few classes on Greek and Roman history that were pretty interesting. So stuff like that. And you might even end up taking enough classes to minor in that. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to like expand your academic interests. And even if like your minor is set on something, you can always like learn about other things, if that makes sense. And then my last point on academics and classes, which is kind of more of a negative thing, is that UCLA is a very large public school, and with that, it can be very difficult to get classes that you want. So when it comes to class enrollment time, it can be very hard and stressful. Oftentimes students have to have a lot of backup classes ready when it comes to their enrollment time to pick their classes, and a lot of those classes will be full. That once again depends on your major and your academic interests. If you want to take only classes that are in very high demand, obviously that will be a little bit harder. And then as you go up and get into your higher grades, like as you continue on through UCLA, you get an earlier enrollment time, so there'll be better chances of you being able to take those classes. And then another great thing that UCLA does to kind of help with that is your first quarter of freshman year, before you even attend UCLA, during your orientation, you get a new student advisor or an NSA. And what they do is they can help you through the entire process of signing up for classes. So freshmen get their own time slot to sign up for classes before anyone else. And so they're able to kind of do that by themselves without the pressure of all the other grades competing for those classes too. And that kind of really helps them understand how that process works and gives them a fair chance for the next quarters and after that. Okay, the next category I want to talk about is housing. And the biggest thing with that I've heard from a lot of people around here, which is something I couldn't agree with more, is that classic triples are definitely not as bad as they seem. So let me go a little bit deeper into that. Classic triples are the cheapest dorm option here at UCLA, and it's actually the dorm I'm in. I have a dorm tour video if you want to check that out and kind of see what that's like. So what comes with that, it's 3 desks, 3 beds, 3 closets, and a communal bathroom. So there's 5 communal showers, 5 communal toilets, and that's for the whole floor. So everyone shares that. And that was definitely a little bit scary kind of coming into this. I didn't really know what to expect. But in terms of like the bathrooms are relatively clean. Like there's definitely, people can be messy, but it's really not a big deal. They clean them every day. The showers are not bad at all. And it's not very crowded either. Like I thought that with there only being 5 showers and 5 toilets, like there's only been like one time that I remember where all the toilets were taken or where almost all the showers were taken. And so that's kind of a misconception that I heard when I first came. There was a lot of people saying that that would be a big problem, that communal bathrooms would be full, but I haven't experienced that. So it is a very big upgrade going from a classic triple to a deluxe triple. which is basically the same idea except there's air conditioning and just like a little bit bigger of a floor plan. We're actually going into a deluxe triple next year, so I'll be posting a dorm tour of that. But yeah, I mean, as the cheapest dorming option, it's definitely very, very doable. So if you're worried about saving money and don't want to spend that extra amount on a little bit nicer of a dorming option, don't worry about it that much. You'll be completely fine. And to add on to this, something interesting that me and my friends have noticed is that with the nicer dorms or the more expensive dorms, people tend to be a lot less social. So within the classic triple, so every dorm building has a communal space, like a lounge. And within the classic triple buildings, we've noticed that a lot more people go out and actually use the lounges. People just don't like to spend time in their room, and they go out and meet people. So if social life is something that's really important to you, and something that you're worried about, like making friends and all that, then classic triples or classic doubles, since they're in the same building, are definitely something that you should consider, just in case you want to like meet the people on your floor and like make close friends with them. I think that's a lot easier in a classic dorm. And so another part of this, something that I personally can't really speak on, but that I've heard a few people say, is that classic doubles tend to be a better option than deluxe triples. And so these are about in the same price range. A classic double is going to be the same layout as a classic triple, except with 2 beds and 2 desks. And so you have a little bit more room between the two of you. And a deluxe triple is just a bigger classic triple with nicer bathrooms and with AC. So with that deluxe triple, once again, you have a little bit less of a social life, in my experience. And with a classic double, you're still in the environment of classic triples, but if you're worried about having your own space and kind of like having more room to yourself, then that might be a better option for you than a deluxe triple. And then in terms of housing in general, something that you want to consider when deciding what dorm building you want to live in is where it's positioned on the hill. So the hill is what we call our housing community. Basically all of our dorms are in one place at UCLA. And so what that means is that all of the dorm buildings are here, right? So something like Deneuve, which is at the bottom of the hill, will be a lot easier to get to from campus. However, it's further away from the dining halls and a little bit more secluded. While Olympic and Centennial, the newer dorms, are at the top of the hill. They have a nicer view, but it's a longer walk. However, it's closer to the dining hall. So it really depends on what works for you. It definitely is a hill though, so it is a pretty big difference from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill in terms of like the amount of walking you have to do. So that's definitely something to consider. And I can make a whole separate video about housing. I think it's something really interesting to consider, especially now that they changed the housing application process, where you could pick your room and your building type. I don't know if they're going to keep that, but that was something new this quarter for next year. And so yeah, if that's something that anyone's interested in, you can leave that in the comments and I'll make sure to make a video about that in the future. So if they do decide to keep that process where you are able to pick your own dorm building, something that I found really important is the direction of your window. So when you're picking a dorm, something that is really helpful in classic dorms, at least where there's no AC, is to make sure that you're picking a room with a window that isn't facing direct sunlight. And that's really helpful since with that direct sunlight, you get a lot of heat into your room. And that might mean that you miss sunrises and sunsets. But in exchange for that, you have a lot cooler of a room that doesn't get as hot during the day and is nicer to be in. And then something that's really important to me is having a nice view. So what I did actually for our dorm next year is I would go onto Google Earth and go at the level of the building and see what the view would be. That's probably a little bit extra, but yeah, that's something that's just really important to me. So things like that are always good to consider when you're picking what dorm you want. So when it comes to what kind of things to bring on campus, I'm planning on making a video about this next year, but just to kind of summarize, I think something that's really important to bring, especially into classic dorms, is a lot of extension cords. So for us, we have 2 sets of outlets. You can actually see it right there. We have 2 of those, one at each of the 2 desks. And it's only 4 plugs. So one of those we have to use for a refrigerator and our fan and stuff like that. And the other one, we need to run an extension cord to the 3rd desk since the 3rd desk doesn't have an outlet at all. So extension cords are super important and something that I think people forget a lot. And then you have to go and buy one here and oftentimes they're out. since a lot of people are buying them like at the Target in Westwood. So that's something to keep in mind. And just talking about other things that I think people forget to bring a lot is just like fun things that you can do to kind of start conversation with people. So for example, some things that I brought were a projector, a speaker, some board games, a hammock, and like picnic blankets, and just things that you can use to kind of be like, hey, like if you want to hang out with me, like new friends, you know, like, oh, we can go and watch a movie on my projector, or we can go and hang out and have a picnic, you know, stuff like that. It just makes it a lot easier to like make new friends and to kind of break that like barrier when you're first trying to meet people. And another thing that we have is a guest chair. It's this round chair from Target. We got it from the Target in Westwood. It was $25. And it's the perfect chair that we can just fold up and take out if we have guests over. So things like that just make the room feel a lot more cozy and inviting. And I think that's really important and something that people forget about. They just think about the necessities, but that's kind of what makes the dorm a home. And on top of that, having nice lighting is something that's really important to me. I brought a lot of like string lights and fairy lights and my plants too. I didn't bring that many. But just bringing a few of those things, just things that make you happy and things that you enjoy having in your room at home, I think are really great to bring here if you're worried about being homesick, or if you kind of spend a lot of time in your dorm and you want it to be cozy and nice. I think that's really important. And then moving on to something that I think is important when you're actually living here. This is kind of a sidetrack from the other stuff, but what I've noticed is that the prime time to shower, if you're worried about the showers being dirty, is in the early evening or late afternoon. This is because they clean the bathrooms, at least for us, around 11 or 12. And so from then until the afternoon, no one's really showering, since people either shower in the morning or at night. And so the showers will be clean if you go earlier in the evening. So that's kind of something that we've gotten used to and something I definitely recommend. And my last thing when it comes to housing, in terms of off-campus housing, if that's something that you're interested in, either a university apartment or a off-campus apartment entirely in Westwood, it can be very expensive. And if that's something you're worried about, the only alternative would be to live somewhere that's not so nice, so somewhere further away and having to commute a little bit. So that can be kind of hard, and it can be very hard to find housing here too. Westwood's not that big of an area, especially in terms of the apartments, since we're kind of shut off by Bel Air and Beverly Hills on both sides, and there's obviously not really apartments there. So within the part of Westwood with apartments, it can be very hard to find housing and parking, which I'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, that also means that you're most likely gonna have to share a room with someone, or live further away that's not in Westwood. So those are kind of things you need to think about if you're worried about, or if you're trying to look into getting your own apartment off campus. My next couple points will be kind of focusing more on the social aspect of UCLA and kind of like the UCLA community and my experience with it. And the first thing I want to note has to do with week 0. So week 0 is this week here at UCLA before fall quarter starts, so at the beginning of the year, where no one has classes and everyone's on campus already. And UCLA just hosts all of these events and like social gatherings for people to meet each other, everything from like just dance nights to like board game thing, just any kind of event that you could think of, and it's just a great time to meet people. And I think that is like a very important time to be here, and I found that it's a lot harder to make friends after that. So that's kind of a crucial week where it's really important to just go out and go to the events, and just get as many people's Instagrams as you can, and just really try to put yourself out there and meet people if you're really looking to make new friends. And on top of that, one thing with the transition to UCLA, you will definitely walk the most you've ever walked in your life in week 0. And that's coming from a lot of people. It's a lot. The transition originally, we were doing walks to Westwood and to like Target and Trader Joe's multiple times that week, and just going to all the events and like exploring campus. It's a lot of walking and it's super fun. But yeah, that's just kind of something we noticed. And on top of that, with the importance of week 0, I think it's really important to try to get an earlier move-in time if you can, since to me this was a very crucial friend-making time, and I would have felt left out if I had moved in later and had missed some of those events. And so if that's something you're worried about, I would suggest maybe applying to be a move-in assistant or an MIA. This is something that I did this year, and what that means is that you're able to move in a week earlier. You attend I think 2 or 3 hour training session, and then you're assigned a certain amount of shifts within the week, and you work for a few hours a day helping people move in. So that means taking the moving carts and moving everyone into their rooms. And this may not be appealing to everyone since it is volunteer work. You don't get paid. You get a certain amount of more meal swipes, but I wouldn't really find it worth it for that. What I did find as a benefit for that was that I was able to move in earlier, so I wasn't moving in during all of the events, and I was already fully moved in, and I was able to explore campus. And I actually made a lot of friends through that program, so either moving people in or my fellow move-in assistants. It was just a great time to meet a lot of people and kind of feel comfortable in the UCLA environment. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that if that sounds like something you're interested in. And then on top of that, I spoke about Westwood a little bit earlier. Westwood is our college town for UCLA. So it's the area right outside of UCLA where all of our like restaurants and like college campusy stuff are that aren't really affiliated with UCLA. But it's not as accessible as you may think. Campus is very hilly, and a lot of people invest in electric scooters or skateboards to kind of move either around campus or to Westwood. It's probably at least a 30-minute walk from the Hill to Westwood. And in terms of the electric skateboards or scooters, I think that's a really great investment. Both of my roommates have them. I probably would have gotten one last year if I'd known that I would be here on campus all 4 years. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, that would definitely be a good thing to invest in your first year. And walking to class, so since the Hill is all in one place with the dorms, that means that all of the classes are in the opposite side of campus. That means that your walk to class is always going to be around 20 minutes. And that's to get from the Hill to campus and back. And that means you have to come back to get your food, which can be a lot depending on your schedule, just kind of with the back and forth. So it's definitely a lot of walking, and I think that's something that UCLA is pretty known for. But that's just something to keep in mind. It doesn't really bother me. It can get kind of hot, but it's not that big of a deal. You definitely get used to it. And then obviously UCLA is in Los Angeles, and LA is a pretty big city, and so with that there comes a pretty large homeless population. And I think a misconception that a lot of people have is that since UCLA is right around the corner from Beverly Hills and Bel Air, people think that there's not as many homeless people here, and I wouldn't say that's true. I think Westwood has a pretty large homeless population, and that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're coming from a rural area where you're not really used to that. Just to kind of have an open mind with stuff like that. However, the plus side of going to UCLA in terms of the area that it's in is that it's very central to a lot of the activities in LA. You can take a bus almost anywhere within LA, and that's something that me and my friends have really been trying out lately. The other day, me and my friend John went to Universal Studios, and we took a bus and a subway train to get there, and it was super fun. We had no idea that LA had like an underground subway system, and even though it's not that elaborate, there's not that many rail lines, it was still super cool and a really fun experience. So doing stuff like that I think is a really great idea. We paid around $350 round trip for the entire thing, and it was really fun. So I wouldn't be too worried if you're thinking that LA doesn't have that great of a public transit system. I've had a pretty positive experience with it, so that's definitely a plus. And then another example of that is that you can take, there's actually 2 bus lines to the beach if you want to go to Santa Monica or to Pacific Palisades, and that costs around $1. There's a super easy app that you download. It's called the Transit app, I believe, and it's the official Metro app. It keeps you up to date on all of the buses that are coming, what time they're coming, where they go, and when you're on the bus you can see how many stops it is until you're at your destination. So that's super useful. And honestly, last year I had a car in my apartment, and it was definitely a much bigger ordeal to take a car to the beach than it was the bus. With a car you have to find parking, and all the parking is metered there, so it can get pretty expensive, and parking is pretty hard at the beach too. So I would say it's definitely more convenient to take the bus for stuff like that. And if you're considering bringing a car, there's a few things about that too. So Parking overall in Westwood is not great. There's not many spots. All of them are metered, and it's very easy to get a parking ticket. The police are super strict here when it comes to that, and they'll give tickets out very frequently. And then if you're looking to get a parking pass on campus, that can be very difficult too. And if you're able to get one, if you have a reason, for example, if you have an off-campus job, or if you're a commuter, if you live nearby, something like that, it would probably cost you around $1,000 for the year for that parking spot. So it's not cheap, and it's not really that convenient. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Not many people that I know of have cars here, so it's kind of more of a rare thing. I think people find other ways to get around, either with scooters or with buses. Yeah. And then another thing about social life, which is something that I've heard a lot here, is that people in general find it not ideal to buy a den pass, which is a pass that gets you into all football games and men's basketball games. And unless you're someone who's really interested in those games and thinks that you're going to be going to all of them, it tends to not be worth it, and you're still going to end up waiting in very long lines to get in, even if you have the pass, especially for games like the USC games. And one upside to that is if you do have the pass and you decide not to go to the USC games, a lot of people do sell their tickets for up to like $50. So you do get some of that money back, but I found it a lot easier to just decide on a couple games that you want to go to and go to those throughout the year, and it ends up saving you money in the long run, and it's less stress to feel obligated to go to those games if you don't have enough time. And all other games, all other Olympic games are free at UCLA for men and women's sports. So I think that's something that you can really take advantage of. It's super fun. Like the other day we went to a gymnastics tournament, which is super fun, and we've gone to a few basketball and volleyball games. So we can definitely recommend that. It's a great time. And then my last point on campus and social life is that campus is a very beautiful place. We have a lot of nature and a lot of seating areas and parks and stuff like that. You'll see a lot of families walking around with like pets or with kids. And so definitely take advantage of that, either like studying outside at one of the picnic benches. A lot of them have outlets and charging areas, or studying at one of the libraries, or just sitting outside on like a sunny day, having a picnic, or like going on a hammock. It's just super nice outside, and it's something that I don't feel like I do enough. And yeah, that's just one of my big tips for living here and kind of making the most of it. So the last category that I'm going to be talking about today is dining. And I talked about this a little bit in my What I Eat at UCLA video, where me and my friend, we ranked all of the dining halls and kind of talked about our experiences with each one. That was pretty early on in the year, so we definitely have different opinions now. But I mean, everyone has their own opinions on the dining halls, so I feel like that's not really the point of this video. I would just say something that I've noticed is that it can be very helpful to check the menus of the dining halls before you go, especially with the buffet dining halls. Some of them are definitely hit or miss on some days. So just spending like 30 seconds before just checking the menu and seeing if there's something for you there that day is something that's very helpful, and we try to do that every day too. Another thing that's a lot of people said is to not take the frozen yogurt machines for granted. There are frozen yogurt machines at Epicuria and I believe at B-Play, and those don't work very often, so whenever those work, definitely take advantage of those. They have a lot of toppings and like sides that you can use for that, so that's kind of like another thing about dining. In terms of meal plan types, once again, I talked about this a little bit in my dining video, so I'll try to keep it short, but in my experience, the most common meal plan is 14p, which is a premium meal plan where you get 14 swipes a week in total, but you get them all in the beginning of the quarter, so it's your job to kind of distribute those throughout the quarter. And that also means that if you want to swipe more than once during a meal period, you can do that. This is compared to a regular meal plan where you get a set amount per week, and if you run out, you have to wait till the next week to swipe again, and you're also not allowed to swipe more than once per meal period. So next year I'll probably be switching to 11p. That's because we'll have a car next year, so we'll probably be eating out a lot more. So that's something to keep in mind if that's something you enjoy doing. And 19p is the other option, or 19R. And in my opinion, I think it's too much, especially if the UCLA dining system stays how it is right now, where you're not able to really share swipes with people or swipe people into dining halls just because of COVID and the understaffed dining workers. So if it stays like that, I don't think 19 is worth it. Even with 14, I'm over on my swipes, and I know a lot of other people are too. You end up having a lot of leftover swipes at the end of the quarter. And to add on to that, with the leftover swipes, something that I think is very important is to make sure that you don't leave your leftover swipes until the last week of school. One mistake that a lot of people make is that they won't check their swipes throughout the quarter and make sure that they're staying on track. And then during finals week, they'll realize that they have 30 or 40 extra swipes. And then the dining halls will be packed and everyone will be swiping multiple times to try to get like extra sandwiches or extra pastries, and the dining halls are just a mess during finals week. So if you can avoid that completely, I think that's a very important thing, especially if you have finals and you're trying to study for those. Another thing that you can also do is donate them. They have a swipe drive every quarter where you can donate any leftover swipes you have. Yeah, so I think that's a really cool resource that UCLA has. Okay, well, I think that's it for this video. I just want to end this off by saying that overall, I have had an extremely positive experience at UCLA, and I cannot think of many regrets that I've had going here. I love all the friends I've made, the classes I've taken, and just the overall experiences that I've had. I couldn't imagine myself at any other campus, and I think UCLA was definitely the right fit for me. I hope this video has helped you kind of gain a little bit more insight into what being a UCLA student is like. And one thing I wanted to add is that I didn't really talk much about my nursing major specifically, and this is a video that I've thought about doing in the future. So if there's anyone interested in me doing a video specifically on nursing and kind of tips I have that I've learned within the nursing program so far, let me know and I'll try to think of a video for that too. There's not much that I've done in terms of the nursing major yet. I'm still kind of going through my prerequisites, but there's definitely some things I would share about the nursing program. So if that's something that interests you, leave that in the comments below. And if you are a future Bruin or someone who's looking into UCLA, definitely leave a comment down below and let me know if you have any other questions or if you want any more advice. I'm happy to share my insight. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.